Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Forestry podcast. I'm your host, Seth Stevenson, the communications coordinator with the Arkansas Forestry Association. And this month, we are back with a new topic, new discussion, and a new voice of forestry. And this month, we're going to be talking about carbon casting, which kind of builds on our carbon sequestration discussion we had a little while ago this year. But before we introduce who our guest is this month, let me thank our sponsors, Shelby Taylor Trucking. We appreciate their continued support of the show, and we're going to hear a little bit more from them later on in this episode. But for now, let's introduce our guest this month. His name is Barclay Rogers, the founder and CEO of Graphite here in Arkansas. That's located in Pine Bluff. Barclay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Seth.
And now you're in actually New Orleans. For full disclosure here, you've been traveling around, but I appreciate you kind of carving out some time for us to talk about kind of what you guys are doing in the Pine Bluff area.
Yeah, thanks. Super excited to talk about it.
Awesome. Well, and Barclay, I tell you what, since you are new to the show, let's start off with just your professional history. Can you let the people know kind of what you've done in your professional world?
Yeah, so I grew up in West Memphis, Arkansas, went to high school there, studied engineering at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, and then basically, to kind of consolidate the story, if you will, I ended up, going to law school out on the West Coast, got a business degree at the University of Cambridge over in England, and just worked a lot in startups, worked a lot in different kinds of startups, in various, parts of the US. And, when I looked to found Graphite, I really wanted to go back home. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. I am in New Orleans right at the moment, but I wanted to come back to Arkansas where I was, born and raised, and to do our first project there. And so you can see that in the project that we have going in Pine Bluff, Arkansas.
Okay. And so Graphite, we should say, kind of specializes in this carbon casting process. Can you just kind of explain what exactly carbon casting is?
Yeah, I know that you guys talked not long ago about carbon sequestration, particularly in the context of forestry. So let me just speak about it that way. So when people are talking about carbon sequestration of any variety, what they're really talking about is something taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and trying to keep it out of the atmosphere. So there are various ways that can happen, right? That a tree can grow and store the carbon in, the biomass of the tree, the trunk of the tree, and that carbon is withheld from the atmosphere as long as that tree is standing, right? There are other ways that people look to do that, often called geologic sequestration, and that is generally taking a gaseous form of CO2, so either capturing it directly from the atmosphere or capturing at the emission source, right, at a power plant, for example, and then injecting that, into a geologic formation underground. The point being is that there's many different things that people are talking about when they're talking about carbon sequestration. In our context, in what we call carbon casting, it's really taking the best of both worlds. That is, it's using trees and other forms of biomass. They naturally capture CO2 as a part of photosynthesis. That's where they get their essentially energy to grow, right? And so we're taking the byproducts of the timber industry primarily. There's some agricultural byproducts that we use as well. There's carbon in that material, so just think sawdust, right? And then we go through a series of engineering steps to ensure that that carbon captured by that plant does not re-enter the atmosphere for a very long period of time. So beyond, the tree being cut down or otherwise falling, if you will, we are, using the byproducts of the milling of that tree and ensuring that carbon does not re-enter the atmosphere.
So Barclay, can you kind of explain a little bit just what that process exactly looks like? Because you guys are taking these byproducts from mills and other agricultural byproducts, and you're essentially creating a brick out of it that you then are putting into the ground, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I'll go back and just kind of talk about the carbon cycle for a moment, right? And
Okay, yeah.
I like to talk about this in the context of well, what happens when a tree falls over, right? Like we all know this, right? The tree falls over, right? And you have the log and it starts to rot, right? And so the question is, well, what causes a log to rot, right? And the answer to that is that there are little organisms called microbes, and the microbes effectively are eating that carbon that's in that, log on the ground. Okay. And that is, what is called either aerobic or anaerobic decomposition, in just very sort of plain language, that is rotting. Okay. And so what does, so now let's stop there. Like, now that we've kind of identified what causes biomass to break down, and go back and talk about what we're doing. So, let's just, again, practical terms, right? We're, growing trees, we're cutting those trees down to make, for timber, right? We're cutting those, logs up into boards. And through that process, we're generating a lot of byproducts in form of sawdust, bark, other unusable parts of the tree. Okay. If left to their own devices, right? If that material is just, left, stacked up at the mill or otherwise spread on the forest floor, what's going to happen? The same thing that would happen to that, log on the forest floor. A microbe would come in and eat it and release the carbon back to the atmosphere. So what we're doing is stopping that, right? So we're taking those mill residuals, and sawdust, bark, those kinds of things. We dry them down, because what do microbes need to live? They need, like any other organism, they need water. So we take the water content below a certain level that stops microbial activity, that keeps the carbon captured by the biomass permanently stored. The rest of the story is essentially about keeping it dry. So how do we do that? Once dry, we press it into a block. We encase that block in a waterproof barrier. We then take those encased blocks and bury them in a underground storage chamber, essentially a lined pit, right, that is lined on the bottom. The blocks are placed into that. It's lined on the top. Those two top and bottom liners are fused together, creating a permanent storage chamber. Again, it's all about utilizing biomass, taking the residuals from existing timber milling processes, drying the material down and keeping it dry, and therefore keeping the carbon from re-entering the atmosphere.
Okay. All right. And so when you bury it, you guys are actually also monitoring it too, just to make sure, I guess, it doesn't get that moisture back into the brick in some shape, form, or fashion. Is that right?
Exactly. And so, imagine that that you have these encased bricks, okay, that they've got literally like a waterproof barrier around them. And then you're placing those encased bricks underground in this sort of storage vault, right? That's likewise lined and then sealed on the top. And so what you have is a permanently sealed chamber, okay, beneath the earth. And we're not talking like very deep. You're talking 30 feet, down, essentially, utilizing an existing old gravel mine in this particular place, because there's already a hole in the ground. So we have that chamber. That chamber has a sampling port on it. So it's essentially a valve. We open the valve, we extract the gases from inside the chamber. We compare those gases to air, to atmospheric air. We're able to do that every 15 minutes and essentially demonstrate that the biomass within the storage chamber is not getting wet, is not breaking down in any way. The carbon is not being released back to the atmosphere.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So, and I guess just out of curiosity, if it does happen to get wet, is it just going back in, removing or unsealing it and removing it, and then trying the process again, or what happens in that instance?
Yeah. So, this is, essentially, if our system were to somehow fail, okay, and that you were able to get the water was re-entering the woody material in some way, it would be the exact situation that we have today, right? That is, that material is, piled up either literally behind the mills or sometimes respread on the forest floor, and it's getting wet and microbes are eating and the carbon's going back into the atmosphere. And so that's the status quo today. That would be, if our system were to somehow, not perform according to its specifications, we'd just be doing, what we're doing today. Okay. So I think that's important to understand, is like, well, what happens if it does fail? And it's essentially the status quo today. If it were to somehow, allow water to re-enter the system, yes, we can reopen it. We can pull the blocks out. We can, re-dry them and recompress them and repackage them. Of course, we don't intend to do that, because we don't, we've engineered the system so it does not happen, but it is possible.
Okay. All right. And so you guys have actually the Pine Bluff location has only been open since early 24, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we opened that facility in April of 2024.
Okay. And how many, I guess on average, bricks are you guys producing in that facility?
Yeah, so what that facility is sized right now to do 15,000 tons of carbon removals per year. Okay. Let me
Okay.
put that in some context. I'm going to talk about two different sort of ways to think about that. Is one that if you look at the various sort of scientific recommendations and so forth, there is the scientific community is calling for carbon removals on the order of 75 million to 350 million tons per year by 2030. Okay, so
Hmm.
very strong projected demand. If you looked across the quote durable carbon dioxide removal space, and I'm happy to describe what durable carbon dioxide removal means, there's a total of about 200, maybe 250,000 tons to date. Okay, so of that 250 or so thousand tons, we are about 15,000 tons of that. Okay, but the point of all that is to say we started relatively small because we wanted to prove that it worked, and we were going, that's essentially the foundation. We're going to expand from there. So we are already contemplating an expansion at the Pine Bluff facility to effectively double, maybe triple the size of that facility because of the abundant biomass resource in the state of Arkansas. There's a lot of mill residuals out there. We want to turn that into a commercial project. We started small, but we intend to expand very rapidly.
Okay. So that kind of takes me into my next kind of question into how does this carbon casting, how does this idea fit into the broader green picture, if you will, that everybody seems to be talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I'm going to come back and kind of talk about it in the context of uh, carbon sequestration with forest, okay?
Hmm.
Because, the trees are capturing carbon, okay? They are storing that carbon basically for as long as that tree is there. And then when that tree is cut down or otherwise dies, that carbon is, being released and, back into the atmosphere. And so what we are looking to do is essentially complement the existing carbon capture happening by forestry by addressing the residuals associated with primarily the milling of those trees
Hmm.
and turning that into a durable carbon removal. And let me just describe for a moment what durable means. Is it means effectively measurable, directly measurable, and of long-term duration. Okay, and people can argue about what that means, but it is hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years when people talk about of long-term duration in the context of durable carbon removal. So, what we are doing is a direct complement to just the growing of trees, period, particularly the growing of trees that has a carbon component to it, because we're able to take the byproduct of those trees once they are harvested and turn it into a durable carbon removal.
Okay. All right. Well, Barclay, I tell you what, this feels like a good spot to kind of kick it to our ad real quick. So we're going to take a quick break and hear a little bit more from our sponsors this month, Shelby Taylor Trucking.
Shelby Taylor Trucking serves all your timberland needs in south central Arkansas. With over 50 years in the industry, Shelby Taylor Trucking has established themselves as trustworthy leaders in the industry. From planting to harvesting to hauling your timber, Shelby Taylor Trucking is ready to serve you. Follow them on all social media platforms at Shelby Taylor Trucking. Learn more by visiting their website at staylortrucking.com. That's staylortrucking.com.
Thank you once again to Shelby Taylor Trucking for their continued support of the show. So, Barclay, we're in the second half of the episode here, and there's a couple other things I wanted to ask you before I let you go about your business there in New Orleans. But one thing I did want to talk about is we talked about the woody residuals that you guys are using specifically here in Arkansas from the mills. And I think people should know that those woody residuals oftentimes there's no use for them for the mill. The mills have no use for them. They just kind of sit there or they get taken away somewhere else to sit. So this carbon casting does in a way provide another market for these mills to get rid of these residuals while also fitting into, again, this bigger picture, this bigger green picture, correct?
That's exactly right. And so, when we look at this, and it's just worth talking a little bit about like the amount of the residuals, what are they otherwise used for, how much, how does supply and demand look, and what does carbon casting mean to that overall sort of equation, right? And so, it's my understanding that when trees are harvested and they're reduced, if you will, to lumber, that there's on the order of 30% of that incoming material that ends up in this sort of residual category. Okay, that's a significant volume of material. When you look at the potential uses of that material, there are some, but they generally tend to be rather limited. That is, that the supply almost always greatly exceeds the demand. So potential uses are for the wood pellet industry, for example. And even when you look at the active wood pellet industry in the state of Arkansas, there's vastly more supply of residuals than is able to be satisfied by the existing uses. So that's how we enter the picture, right? Is effectively taking the material, the excess supply, if you will, and turning it into a product that people are willing to pay for. Okay, so we are paying the timber mills for the biomass residuals. We are not being paid, by them for some kind of disposal fee or anything. Like, we are literally, paying them. And what does that mean? It means, I like to describe it this way. It's essentially taking the residuals and turning it into treasure, right? It's taking a byproduct that did not have really a commercial use and, turning it into a commercial use that is a additional revenue stream for timber mills and others. It's also jobs, right? Like, this is truck drivers, taking the material from the mill and taking it into our processing facility in Pine Bluff. And so it's a positive economic impact for the state of Arkansas, and particularly within the forestry value chain.
And what has the response been? You don't have to mention names by any stretch of the imagination, but what has the response been from some of these mills that you guys have been working with here over the past several months?
I would say very positive, right? I think one of the things, I'm a very practical person, right? And numerous people, come to the mill, oh, we're thinking about using your residuals for A, B, C, and D. And, often those people don't show back up, right? And it's kind of a question, it's more of a, if you will, sort of a, pie in the sky idea versus a practical solution, right? So one of the things that was really important to me in getting, graphite off the ground in Arkansas was like, we do what we say we're going to do, right? And so, we showed up at the mill. I think they probably put us in the category of the other dreamers, right? But then we showed back up and we showed back up and we said, okay, we're ready to take a delivery now. Where do we write the check, right? Okay, we're ready to increase that, initial delivery, by X percentage. Okay, how do we get, more trucks, right? How do we write a bigger check? And so, I think the response has been overwhelmingly positive, particularly as we started following through with what we said we were going to do.
And so you mentioned at the top of the episode that you wanted to come back home to Arkansas, but one thing I wanted to ask specifically is why pursue something like carbon casting and why do it here in Arkansas?
Yeah, there's really two answers to that story. One answer to that story is I'll just say a practical one, and that is when you look across the nation, right, that we wanted to build our first project using both residuals from the timber industry and from the agriculture industry. So we were located in Pine Bluff, effectively because that's the intersection of those two. As you know, right, we have agriculture to the toward the Delta, right, and to the east of Pine Bluff, and we have timber to the west. And so we wanted to prove to ourselves, prove to our customers, prove to our investors that there are places where literally you can use both timber residuals and agricultural residuals. And Pine Bluff was just a very logical place. There's just not that many places, candidly, in the world where you have that type of resource, both of those resources in proximity to one another. So that's answer one, is the practical answer. Answer two is more of the personal variety, and that is, like I said, like I grew up in Arkansas, I left and had a career in all kinds of startups, over roughly a 20-year period in California and in England, right, and various countries. And I started to grow kind of a little bit frustrated to see like all of that sort of new activity, like the innovation so often occur, on the coast. And I come back and I'm a proud Arkansan, right? You think about it, like Walmart's one of the biggest companies in the world, right? And it was born and raised in Arkansas, and they built their empire from Arkansas, right? And so a big part of it, the big part of the motivation for me was personal, is to bring innovation, bring that sort of leading edge of the economy back to Arkansas. Let's do it, let's start there and let's grow, from a strong base in the natural state. And so I'm proud of both of those facts, the fact that we are using, the byproducts of the agriculture and timber industry that's such a big part of the Arkansas economy. And we're bringing innovation, to Pine Bluff, to the heart of Arkansas, and building a new company from there that candidly has national and international aspirations.
Okay. Well, Barclay, let me ask you this. Looking forward, I know you said that you guys are wanting to kind of ramp things up a little bit here at the Pine Bluff facility, but what are your goals for graphite over the next 5, 10, 20 years?
So our goal is, it is literally our mission as a company is to be the largest supplier of durable carbon dioxide removals in the world. Okay. So if you look across, the press, and you see different people talking about different things and so on and so forth, in the carbon space, we believe that we have a realistic shot at being the biggest in the world doing this. And that will start from our base in Pine Bluff, and we will grow from there. So what does that mean? It means that we built our initial, pilot facility in Pine Bluff. We're looking to expand that facility in Pine Bluff literally right now. Okay. We've got additional projects in development in the, American Southeast. We're looking into Mississippi, looking into Alabama, other places that have, healthy, if you will, timber industries. And from there, we're looking to grow, to the Mountain West, right? And internationally from there. And so, it's from a small beginning, right? Many things, start that way, but we have very, aggressive, but I also say sensible aspirations to grow graphite into a very large company, and again, to be the largest supplier of durable carbon removals in the world.
And it's all starting here in the natural state.
All starting in the natural state, and I'm very proud of that fact.
All right. Well, Barclay, is there anything else you want to say or you want to add before we wrap this up?
I'd just say that we are very pleased to be a part of the Arkansas Forestry Association. It's been a very sort of welcoming environment. It's allowed us to meet with a lot of the relevant, players in the industry. And so that was a, very fortunate, if you will, development for us to be able to join the association and get to know folks. Looking forward to seeing people in Oakland here in a couple of weeks.
All right, awesome. And we're looking forward to working more with you guys. Like you said, you started up in 2024, and I know Max was out there for the ribbon cutting. And I think we're excited to see kind of what you guys are doing for our folks there in the Pine Bluff area.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, Barclay, thank you for joining me. I appreciate, again, you carving out a little bit of time for me today, and your very, very busy schedule. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Seth. Take it easy.
All right. And we want to thank you guys for joining us this month. If you want to find more music from some guy named Rob McCormick, he does our theme song, The Same Love. That's off of his album, The Folkster. You can find more of his music on Spotify. And as always, we'll have a link to his website in the description of this episode. And we want to make sure we give one more shout out and thank you to Shelby Taylor Trucking for their sponsorship of this month's episode. And if you have any questions about what we do here at the Arkansas Forestry Association or what some of our members like Barclay and Graphite are doing, you can find us at arkforest.org. That's arkforest.org. Make sure you come back next month when we'll have a new topic, a new discussion, and a new Voice of Forestry.